Going into season 6 of Better Call Saul, many of the most common questions we hope to see get answered centered around the moral collapse of the main characters. Questions like, how does Jimmy become Saul? How does Mike become totally loyal to Gus? And will Kim continue down her own dark path? Episode 3, titled Rock and Hard Place, takes us on a different journey. It's not a journey about how a character falls into the black abyss of wickedness, but rather how he's able to pull himself out and secure redemption. It was a moving story and one I was excited to see, given that Kim, who used to be the show's moral foundation, is beginning to look like a lost cause. Better Call Saul needed some goodness and some transcendence, and that is exactly what we got through the sacrifice of Ignacio Varga. Before I get into Nacho's heroic conclusion and the many symbols associated with it, I want to start by discussing Kim and Jimmy, because this episode was important for their arc as well. And Rhea Seahorn delivers yet another genius facial expression that communicates her moral standing. The episode picks up right where Carrot and Stick left off, with the theme of justice. We start with Jimmy continuing to plot out the destruction of Howard with color coded post it notes, got to appreciate the organization, and when Kim enters, next to her in the frame is a movie poster of the 1932 film Outlaw Justice. I talked about Kim's perception of justice in my analysis of last week's episode, which you should check out, but in short, it's exactly what the poster says. It's outlaw justice. It's, we live in an unfair world where the weak fall between the cracks of our justice system, and I need to go outside the law to act as a safety net. That is what Kim believes to her core. And when Kim enters the room to find Jimmy fully invested in the plot, fully invested in the righteous mission, the seemingly lost infatuation she used to have for Jimmy returns. And the way they help each other get dressed demonstrates how in sync they are on this particular morning. This ultimate con is pretty much all that's holding them together at this point. So things are looking more optimistic until Suzanne pulls Kim into her office and informs her that the DA has figured out Jorge de Guzman's true identity, and now they want Jimmy to sing. And in return, they look away from any crimes he may have committed while working in service to the Salamancas. During this scene, Suzanne makes a moral argument to Kim. She says Lalo was a killer, and Jimmy and you both know the situation was handled wrong, but the bad choice can be rectified. And while she makes this pitch, Kim looks to the ground. It's brilliant acting. Almost like a kid who can't look up when they're being scolded by their parents. She's actively ignoring the truth. And then Kim corrects Suzanne by saying, it wasn't Jimmy who represented Lalo, it was Saul. This is but another example of Kim identifying more with Saul than with Jimmy, and I expect the trend will only intensify the farther down bad choice road they go. Jimmy's side of the episode is mostly centered around him carrying out another mission in the con, which is made more entertaining than it has a right to be by some great camera work and an incredible soundtrack, but it's a conversation he has with Huel afterwards that is most intriguing. Huel asks Jimmy the obvious question: you don't need to do this, so why do you do it? And Jimmy, who is perhaps trying to convince himself, responds with Kim's outlaw justice rationale: we're doing it to make the world a better place. And Huel is instinctively put off by this response, but he's not the one under Kim's spell, of course. And the final scene between Kim and Jimmy is a masterclass in showing how Kim's spell works. Kim Wexler is very clever when it comes to using language. She doesn't outright insult Jimmy for being weak or naive, she just insinuates. Like in episode 2 when she says, you gave them the money, didn't you? And then just leaves it there. Kim's particular brand of malevolence is subtle. It's not explosive like Walter's or ice cold like Gus's. Suzanne gives Jimmy, and by extension Kim, a binary choice, which Kim admits to. But even though she makes it seem like it's all up to Jimmy and the options are both to be evenly considered, she has a desired path, and that's the path that's friendly to the cartel. She makes her preference clear initially by how dismissive she is towards Suzanne's moral argument. Kim tells Jimmy, Suzanne wants to talk, she says it's right. There's just the perfect amount of disdain in her voice when she utters that sentence. The delivery is so good. The moral component was key. By dismissing it, Kim is nodding towards the alternative option. And she continues her subtle persuasion by saying, they're just fishing, there's no real risk, and if you do talk, well, you'd be a rat. Not an informant, not someone who's potentially saving lives, a rat. She makes the language as blunt as possible. And make no mistake, if Kim wanted him to talk to the DA, he would. Jimmy would do anything to appease her at this point. But we know where Jimmy's path is headed, and it's not into the arms of the state. So, as Kim's story continues to develop in season 6, keep the scene between Kim and Suzanne in the back of your mind because it perfectly encapsulates where Kim is at. She has no interest in humoring the ethical perspectives of other people, she has her belief, and that's all that matters. Because the world needs order and the world needs justice. True justice.
Bye, Lydia.
The first 2 episodes of the season belong to Kim Wexler. Episode 3 belonged to Nacho and the brilliance of Michael Mondo. It was incredibly sad to see such a great character killed off, especially this early in the season, but it was nearly the perfect send off as far as I'm concerned, and there were so many symbols involved, one of which will be my symbol of the week. Now, the first symbol lays out Nacho's entire character arc. When we met him in season 1, he's the right hand of a murderous psychopath. He's more rational than Tuco, but he's cold blooded and he's greedy. He wants money and he wants power. There are moments that suggest he can move past those selfish desires, but it's not until he suffers tremendously that he's able to recognize the error of his ways and become something more. The entire oil truck sequence is visually stunning, and I like this shot in particular because the shadows make the cylinder look like the barrel of a gun to me. Hopefully, I'm not the only one who sees that. But it's the oil baptism that will go down as one of the defining moments of Better Call Saul. It has echoes of the Shawshank Redemption, and I can't help but think of the quote, Andy Dufresne's who crawled through a river of shit and came through clean on the other side. That's Nacho in this world. He's been in the abyss. He walked side by side with some very evil people, but when the chips were down and he was given a choice, he emerged as a moral actor, the only clean one left. Because on a spiritual level, the people who drag him out to the desert for judgment are the ones covered head to toe in filth. They're the ones who are held captive by their own hatred and pride. And Hector shooting Nacho's dead corpse shows us this difference. Nacho found peace in the end, these people never will. In fact, Hector's final seconds are pure revenge and hatred. But the baptism and rebirth is not the only symbolic imagery used to show Nacho's purity and transcendence. When he washes the oil off himself, he's covered in sunlight, divine light in a sense, and then when he steps into the gas station, we're given this uniquely composed image. The plate hanging over his head is no accident, of course, and if I could guess what it is, I think it's a makeshift halo of sorts. And I think that because when he calls his father, next to him is an image of Saint Mary. Christian mythology is almost impossible not to reference when you're telling a sacrificial story, since it is the archetypal sacrificial story, but I thought the way they weaved in the Christian symbols helped emphasize Nacho's innocence and the sacrificial nature of his death quite well. My favorite part of Nacho's final conversation with his dad, which should get him an Emmy nomination in a just world, is after he hangs up, he's completely overcome by sadness and regret, but a smile eventually breaks through, and then a couple seconds of laughter. In my own mind, I see this as Nacho remembering a moment from his childhood, a happy moment with his father. And this memory is the boost he needs to bear his cross, if you will. Once Nacho makes the decision to die, there are an array of shots that forecast his future. We see Nacho in a metal grave with his eyes closed, we watch him have his final meal like a prisoner on death row, and also share a final drink with Mike, which is one of the most beautiful images of the episode. All of these moments show a man who's afraid, but fully prepared to follow through on his decision. And that's one of the sharpest parts of Mondo's performance. It wasn't too stoic or devoid of fear. It was very human and vulnerable. The symbol of the week has a direct connection with the final standoff in the desert, and that symbol is the blue flower that grows over Nacho's grave. There are 3 different elements in the cold open that are worth talking about: the flower, the piece of glass, and the storm thundering over both. Now, the flower, I believe, is a tribute to Nacho and the tragedy of his death. Blue has commonly accompanied tragedy in this world. Drew Sharp and Andrea are both killed while wearing blue, and Jane is buried in a blue dress. In Nacho's specific case, I think there's an element of freedom as well. He goes out on his own terms after spending years at the mercy of evil men, and blue has always represented freedom because of the sky and the sea. The piece of glass and the storm are more open to interpretation, and I personally like the idea of the storm representing the impending doom of Heisenberg because it works well alongside the theme of there being good ways to die and bad ways to die. When Nacho leaves the gas station owner who treated him kindly, he leaves all of his money behind, which looks bloodstained because of the oil. He chooses love over greed. He transcends power and money. But the men surrounding him, including Mike, don't see the immaterial angle of a good death and a bad death. They see a good and bad death in terms of only physical pain. All of the men who supervise the sacrificial killing are punished for their greed and thirst for power. Once Walter enters the picture in Cook's Blue Sky, everything is done to make sure its production continues. Walter only defeats Gus because Gus is unwilling to let go of his product. And the cartel is killed because they want Blue Sky for themselves. So that's what they die for: blue glass that can be traded for green paper. Is that a good way to go? Well, I guess it depends on your worldview. Breaking Bad felt like a modern day myth to me in many ways, and I think a lot of that feeling had to do with Bryan Cranston's legendary performance and the symbols surrounding his character. I had not had a similar feeling about Better Call Saul until this episode. Nacho's death felt like it had eternal ramifications, like there would be divine judgment for those involved. And I think the cold open embraced that transcendent feeling with the thunder and the rain. And I loved it. Alright, guys, if you have any comments about Rock and Hard Place, definitely leave them in the comments section. And believe it or not, Lalo has been absent for 2 episodes in a row, which is pretty shocking. But it will be interesting to see his reaction to Nacho's death, that is for sure. But thanks so much for stopping by, subscribing your way out if you want to see more Season 6 content, and have a fantastic rest of your day. I'll talk to you soon.